or not we've rejected whether or not we decided to reject HO or not. Whether or not we've done that, we always start with this part for our conclusion. We always say at an alpha level of blank. And here we put in our alpha level, which in our case was 0.05, and usually will be 0.05, but in rare cases maybe 0.01. The second part, it changes depending on whether we fail to reject or if we rejected. Now, in our case, we rejected HO, but let's take a look at what this conclusion would look like had we failed to reject. Whenever you fail to reject, you say, as a second part of the conclusion, you say there is insufficient evidence to conclude, and then you say whatever your alternative hypothesis was, your research hypothesis, because there was insufficient evidence to prove what it is you were trying to prove. So let's take a look at what that would look like in our case had we failed to reject. We would have said at an alpha level of 0.05, there is insufficient evidence to conclude that the average weight of infants born in our hospital is less than 3,100 grams. However, we didn't fail to reject. We rejected. So if we reject, we would say this. We would say at an alpha level of 0.05, the average weight of infants born in our hospital is significantly less than 3,100 grams. And we tried to say the word significantly as snobbishly as possible, because we've really achieved something when we find something significant. That's what we're trying to do as researchers. So we would say at an alpha level of 0.05, the average weight of infants born in our hospital is significantly less than 3,100 grams. Now comes the third part. The third part I call the statistical string. And it changes depending on what type of statistic you did. But it almost always starts by telling what the statistic was. In our case, we did a t-test. And then it's followed by a parenthesis and usually followed by the degrees of freedom. So in this case, it's t, parenthesis 9, because we had 9 degrees of freedom, and a parenthesis. Then you put a space, an equal sign, a space, and then we put what our t-comp was. In this case, it's negative 2.2678. Then we put a comma, and then we put a p. That p actually should be italicized. Then there's a space, an equal sign, a space, and then we put our p-value that we got from Excel. Now, if we didn't get a p-value from Excel, we would know that because we had rejected, that our p must be less than 0.05. If you failed to reject, then we'd know that our p was greater than our alpha, which in this case is 0.05. But because we have Excel, we could know exactly what it is, so we might as well put it. We put p equals 0.0248. Then in parentheses, we put whether this is a one-tailed or a two-tailed test. Now that's done with t-tests. And it's done with several other tests, but it's not done with all statistical tests, because some statistical tests can only be one-tailed. In this case, this is a one-tailed test. This one could be one or two-tailed, so we have to say that this is a one-tailed test. Now let's put this all together. Here are our 7 steps. Let's look at the 7th step first. At an alpha level of 0.05, the average weight of infants born in our hospital is significantly less than 3,100 grams. T, with 9 degrees of freedom, equaled negative 2.2678. Our P was 0.0248, and we did a one-tailed test. Now let's review all 7 steps. I start out by doing step 2. I state what our research hypothesis is. In this case, we believe that the mean is less than 3,100 grams. For the HO, step 1, we have to put everything else as possible. In this case, we'd say the mean is greater than or equal to 3,100 grams. Now, if we can rule out or show that it's highly improbable that the mean is greater than or less or equal to 3,100 grams, then our research hypothesis must be true, or is more likely to be true. Then we say our alpha. Step 3 is our probability that we're willing to be wrong. In this case, 0.05. 4, we put a rejection rule. This is at this probability, what would we have to get for t before we could decide to reject the null hypothesis? Step 5, we use Excel to find the t-comp. In this case, we got negative 2.2678. Step 6, because by our rejection rule we get to reject HO, we reject HO. 7, we write our conclusion. Now the conclusion is the only thing we publish. The other 6 steps are just to help us get to our conclusion. But for this class you do have to do all 7 steps. But when you write up a research study, all you'd say is at an alpha level of 0.05, the average weight of infants born in our hospital is significantly less than 3,100 grams. T parenthesis 9 equals negative 2.2678. P equals 0.0248, and it was a one-tailed test.